crack about not wearing white before Memorial Day, but I guess this is just camouflage today. So, my name's Ted Herman, and I'm interested in potato chip history because that's what I grew up with. My family founded Middleswarth Potato Chips, and when Nikki asked me to give a program on that here at the Society, even though they're sold locally, I really wanted to dig into the history of local potato chips, and that led me to the three local chips that I was able to find: Shutters, widely known, Arrow Chips, and Gary's Chips. And so that's what I wanted to talk with you a little bit about today. Just get the thing there. Just brief history of the potato chip industry, my background, the local chip manufacturing. See, you should have been scrolling while I was talking before, so we'll get this down. And really the things that are you might seem unique to potato chip making really aren't. The packaging, the way the production is made, those things are all very similar to the way it was 100 years ago. The only difference is mechanization has made the process more efficient and able to be done on a much larger scale. So Central Pennsylvania has a ton of local potato chips, and these are just a couple of them. Obviously, it's called I read an article one time that called Central Pennsylvania the snack food capital of the world, and potato chips are a big part of that. Potato chips were actually invented in 1853. The story goes that this George Crumb was a chef and served French fries, which were popular back then. And the wealthy guests at the lodge in Saratoga Springs, where he worked, kept complaining that they were too thick, and so he kept slicing and slicing until he got them really razor thin, and kind of a by accident invention. First commercial chip production that I was able to identify was 1908, a company that started in Massachusetts. Before that, they were just made and sold at local eateries. The early chips were popularized almost like you might see popcorn at like the seashore, where it was just sold, kind of through window or on the counter at a store by the scoop. I was able to identify an ad in the Hershey Press in 1915 that noted that the chips were for sale at the Hershey department store, and then after that time, I think when you think how business has changed over the years, and looking back at all the small corner stores and lunch counters and things that were in business, it's not hard to see why potato chips were able to be made on a small scale and for people to stay in business that way. Here's the one ad that I mentioned. You can see I have highlighted here potato chips from the Hershey department store in that 1915. And this I thought was interesting. This was about 5 years later, in 1920. There was an ad talking about a food sale. One of the homemade foods that they were selling at the United Brethren Sunday School was homemade potato chips. So the first chip production that started in Hershey was Arrow Chips. Began in 1937 at 222 Cocoa Avenue, founded by Ira Bayshore and his family. Ira and Catherine, or Kitty. Next one. That's them. And Ira was a very enterprising gentleman. Dabbled in many ventures. He actually worked full-time as a teller at the Campbelltown Bank, and lived in Hershey, but had a small farm outside of town. Raised one or two race horses. Purchased a pretzel and popcorn maker in Palmyra, and so he was just dabbling in different things. Began making chips in his own kitchen in 1937, and let's go to the next one. And it moved to the back of the house. I believe that's the kitchen. And go to the next one. And moved to the garage. Now, I actually talked with Ira's daughter, and she said that This, I believe, is a garage right here with three stalls, which she described chip making going on in one stall, rabbits being raised in the next one, and a pony in the third. So that must have been a very interesting garage. The setup was Catherine peeled them, Ira fried them, bagged them in the dining room, and delivered them late in the evening. And apparently, because of all of his other business ventures and stuff, that they would send the kids out with him on the delivery truck because they talked nonstop, and that would keep him from falling asleep during his delivery. He named them Arrow Chips because he thought it was a play on his name, Ira, and also because he said they hit the spot. It's a name for Arrow. Actually, it was kind of ironic when I was doing the research for this that his name would be Ira because that's my great-grandfather's name, Ira Middleswarth. So we got two Iras here today. They had a delivery truck, and it was Arrow Chips. One of the taglines for their chips was called Red Hots, and he delivered them locally, had one size, the nickel bag, and delivered them locally. And during the war, he went out to Indiantown Gap and sold them along with his pretzels and popcorn. In 1942, he moved to Campbelltown, and this was the old Peter's Butcher Shop, and had expanded production, and employed about 6 to 8 people. And apparently this, being a butcher shop, had cold storage area and only had a couple different rooms, so he would store the potatoes where their cold storage was, and then they would be fried in another room, and then all the other production from the cooling, salting, bagging. Of course, bags back then were like a wax paper, what they call glassine, and they would be stapled shut, and that was also where they were stored. And another thing I thought was interesting, he apparently made red and green dyed chips for Christmas, and he also experimented with sweet potato chips, which are very popular today. So, the next one. In 1944, there was a fire that completely destroyed the plant, but he rebuilt. And there's a little discrepancy here as to whether memories that long ago aren't quite as sharp. If production did continue until 1947, but unsure if they continued at this location or if it went back to the garage. And the family took a trip in 1947 to visit Ira's sister who lived in Hawaii, and they never came back. He made a return trip, sold his business ventures, and went to work for the Oahu Transport Company, and never came back to Hershey. He died in 1989, and I have a couple of examples of some of their promotional pieces there. The next chips that are up are Gary's. George Garrison Jr. was the proprietor of this business, and he was the oldest of 13 children in the family that was originally from Virginia, and they moved to Hershey when he was fairly young and actually lived in Swatara Station. Apparently there was a house at one time across from where Curry's Mill sits, right in front of the quarry there. And that was where they lived. He became, he worked on the railroad, worked in the chocolate factory for a little bit, and in 1935 became a full-time house parent at Milton Hershey School. And that went on for about 10 or 12 years, and he gave that up and bought his own independent milk route, where he would go out and collect milk cans from local farms, deliver them to a Harrisburg creamery. And when he did that, he decided to try his hand at making potato chips. Now, I don't know if it played in the timing with Arrow's going away and Garrison maybe trying to pick up some of that business, but the timing's very close there. And Garrison's had a small, again, garage type of setup, and this was hit it again. This was George Garrison Jr., and he he made chips and apparently eventually went back to Milton Hershey School and became a farm boss. But I thought it was interesting that even as the farm boss, he was wearing the shirt and tie. So that's an interesting picture. We'll go to the next one, please. And this was the whole crew. And this was him right here in the end. And go to the next one. This was the house that he resided at, 557 Park Ave, just a stone's throw from here. And the garage right behind it was, there you go. And you can actually see here where it's been rebricked, where it would have had bays. And he had he would go out in the morning, pick up his milk, deliver it to the creamery, come back in the afternoon, fry chips, and then they would take them and let them cool, salt them, and bag them in the dining room. And then he had a separate panel truck where he would deliver them to Hummelstown, Campbelltown, Palmyra areas, local distributor, and one size bag, 5-cent bag, which was the most popular back then. And I thought it was interesting because his son remembered him making chips and bagging them, and the bags were plain. There was nothing on the bags, but they would attach a paper tag to the front of the bag. And that was actually one of the things. I have a picture of it here that was very popular with the early cans. A lot of the early cans were just plain without a label affixed to them, and they would stick a paper tag in between the lid and the can, and so it's very similar to what they did, but with the bags. There's only 3 people involved: George, his wife, Gertrude, and his sister-in-law Florence, and they did all the production. And lasted for about 3 years. In 1950, as I mentioned, he went back to work for Milton Hershey School as a house parent, I think briefly, and then became a farm boss, and that was where he stayed for the rest of his career. He resided in Hershey the rest of his life. Passed away in 1985. The next one. Shutters is the most widely known, and I think probably the biggest chip manufacturer in Hershey. And they were in business for approximately 12 years, and it was Harry and Helen Shutter, who were originally from the Enville area, moved to Hershey after World War II. This was Harry during the war, and then the two of them. And he was a salesman. He was selling things like windows and vacuums, and he eventually built his house on Sand Hill Road in 1948. Had 6 kids, and but none of them were involved in the business. None of them apparently had any interest. And his wife, interestingly enough, started the company. Her brother had experimented with chips out in Lebanon County for a year or so, and so had a little bit of knowledge of manufactured chips. And they used the family home, the garage is the family home again, that's the most popular, and started making chips. And after about a year, Harry Shutter decided that was a better way of life than what he was doing, and so he bought Helen's brother, Guy Seeger, out of his half of the business, and it was just the two of them. And that was 1957, and he named the chips Shutter's Superior Chips because apparently he said that they were going to be the most superior chip in the area. And I've noticed that he's got this kind of Three Musketeers looking swashbuckling character on there, and I asked his daughter what came up with that, and apparently he just liked it. He liked that time in history, and that was what he picked for their logo. And this is the garage. It's pretty much untouched. In fact, I went over, and the people that lived there were kind enough to show me around a little bit. And they had bought it from the Shutters, so it really hasn't been touched in the last 20-some years. But the original garage, you can see very definitively, would have stopped right here. And then after several years, about 1958-59, they built the extension on the back here that about tripled the size of the garage. And that became their production area. And just in the back, and it was very difficult to capture, but there's a little maybe 10 by 10, the very last 10 feet of it. It has siding on the outside, but it's actually block on the inside, and that's where they would fry. They kept their potatoes in the back, and had their fryers in the back, and then in this area here was the production where the chips would come out. They would cool them. There's apparently a large built-in Formica shelf that went pretty much the whole length of that side, and they would cool them, and it was still, even though it was a more mechanized operation, it was still very hands-on at that level. They would get 100 pounds of peanut oil, get 100-pound bags of potatoes, and would store everything in the garage. And this went on for approximately 12 years. They would make the chips by the batch, and there had been I guess the best way to describe it is like an old washing machine. It was a tub, and it was hand cranked, and you would put the chips right after they came off the fryer into this tub. And as you cranked it, the centrifugal force would spin the excess oil off of the chips and make it a more desirable product. And so he had one of these in here. He would spin them and then lay them out on like an oilcloth to let them cool, salt them, weigh them, bag them, and the same type of wax paper bag that we were talking about. And I think about 1960 he started to get into a bulk shipment, and that was where they would go into the tubs and the tins and the paper cartons. I'm sorry, I missed this one. This was actually that block building that I was talking about in the back, and they've apparently painted this like 25 times, and you can still see the oil residue seeping through where the fryer was. I thought that was interesting. But at a certain point, sales increased. They had several drivers. They would make chips 5 times a week, and he actually had a little bit of a wider distribution. I think it grew from Homelstown to Palmyra, but out to Annville, down to Mannheim, went to Lebanon, northern Lancaster County, and would hit a lot of your grocery stores, Peroneo's, Hilltop, Species, but also like the Legion, Italian Club, places like that. And after about 12 years, Bickles potato chips approached them and wanted to buy them out, and they agreed. He was about 60 years old at that time, and decided to sell the business with the contingency that they would keep the name for 8 years. And so this is from about 1976 when Bickles started to phase shutters out. And Harry and Helen both resided in Hershey. She passed away in 1991, and he died at age 87 in 1996. Excellent. So here we are. This is the potato chips that I'm most familiar with. This is Ira Middleswarth and Son Incorporated. Ira was my great-grandfather, and Ira had 3 children. My Uncle Bob, who was the son, and he had twin daughters, Joan and Phyllis, and Joan is my grandmother. And I should go to the next one. I don't know if you're familiar with Snyder County, but this is Snyder County, and right here in the crossroads, at almost the dead center, is Middleburg. That's where production takes place today. It started about the first 15 years that they were in business. It was about 10 miles west, right about here, which is the town of Beavertown. Town about 800 people back then. Not much bigger today. This is the view as you're driving up to the plant. And go to the next one. And this is what the plant looks like. It's about 80,000 square feet. And I'll come back to this slide some as we go through, but it has 2 different layers. It was built with primarily from here front in 1961, and 1974, the back portion, pretty much from where the tractor trailer's back was added, and it almost doubled their production. Middleswarth began in 1942. This is 1941 Beaver Vocational High School class picture. And right here in the middle, you'll notice two girls that look very similar. They would be my aunt and my grandmother. And yes, they did dress alike until they were 18. And this right here is my Uncle Bob. When he graduated from Beaver Vocational in 1941, he bought an independent, they called bread route. And so he had his own truck, and he would distribute Stroman bread, a brand called Rule, snack cakes and cookies. And he also sold Hartley's Chips, which was made nearby Lewistown. And this was my young picture of my great-grandfather, Ira, and the next one. And this is Lottie. Love that dress. And they stepped in to help out, as I'll describe in the next few slides here. When World War II broke out, my uncle had some supply problems. This is my uncle in his Air Force uniform. He was drafted in 1942, and prior to him being drafted, Hartley's had two sons that were helping in their production who were drafted. Shortening was also rationed, and so their production was scaled back quite a bit. However, my uncle realized that he could get a shortening ration, and so he and my great-grandfather went to a couple down in Dillsburg, and they actually helped train them, teach them how to make their own chips. And when my uncle was drafted, my grandfather, who at that time had worked at the Department of Highways in Harrisburg, quit his job, came home, took over the route, and with my great-grandmother helped make chips and keep the business going. And then when my uncle came back from the war, the business expanded and just focused on chips, and they dropped the bread and the snack cakes and stuff. And my grandfather also worked at the potato chip company. This is his World War II picture. And if I had a helmet on, I would probably look like him. I asked my son the other night when I was putting this together, I said, "Who does that look like?" And he said, "Well, that looks like Pat, my dad." So the resemblance is there. Although he was 6'2" and had a full head of hair when he died, so I missed something. The next one, please. This was, I mentioned my aunt, my grandmother's twin. She got married in early 1944, and this is her right here. This is their wedding picture. And she never had anything to do with the chip. She helped out for about a year. When they got married, my other uncle was a teacher, and they moved away, and so she really doesn't fit into the family picture of the chip making. This is the house on Market Street in Beaver Town where my great-grandparents lived. And this is the little, like a summer kitchen right off of the side where the first chips were made. And they had a gas-fired kettle, and very similar to what the other operations were, made by the batch. The recipe was 8 pounds of potatoes and 50 pounds of shortening. And they would be stored in the basement. They would be peeled down there, because this, oddly enough, as a kitchen, it had no running water. So they had to peel and clean the potatoes separately and then bring them in there to be fried. And there was a slicer mounted on the side of the kettle. I think it would handle a couple of potatoes at a time. You put it in there, you crank it, would slice them right in. You'd stir them with like a wire mesh little basket, and then after approximately 5 to 8 minutes, depending on how they looked, scoop them and lay them out on oilcloth to cool, salt them, bag them in a wax paper bag, and staple them shut, and they're ready to go. One size bag, again, 5 cents, and that was the production method. Go to the next one. This is the rear of the home. Now, I don't know what it looked like in 1942, but I'm guessing it looked a little nicer. And this was the back here. This is the summer kitchen. And my great-grandparents actually lived right next door. And so there was a lot of help between the families for that. Go to the next one. When my uncle came back from the service in 1946, they moved moved production from the kitchen down here to this garage barn in their backyard, and it actually expanded. At a certain point, they hired a couple of employees to help. I'd never been in this barn, but my grandmother described it as this was the door right here, and there was a bay back here where my uncle's delivery truck would be parked. And then apparently there was there were some steps up, and then there were some more steps up, but there was a platform over here, and there was a platform down here, and so you were at 2 levels. And so you would have frying going on one level, and packaging going on in the other. And the reason that they moved down here was because there was running water down here, and there wasn't at the summer kitchen. So go figure. In 1950, they built this plant. Now it's of course in somebody else's hands right now. Last I knew, it was a business that made caps for like the back of the pickup, and that's what I think the racks are in there. But this was about a 2,800 square foot building. And the reason that they built here was it was just a block away, but my great-grandfather had a lumber business. And the sawmill was located on this parcel of land. And so that was the convenient place to build. And they had expanded again to about 20 employees, and they were producing about 350 pounds of chips an hour. And the production expansion was again a form of mechanization. Instead of doing batches by hand, you now have a continuous process, continuous fryer, automatic peeler, very advanced. Soon after they moved to this new plant, they decided to incorporate. And they had been calling themselves for 7 years or so, Middleswarth Kitchen Cooked Potato Chips. When they went to incorporate, somebody was already using the Kitchen Cooked name, so it became Kitchen Fresh, which is what they're still incorporated as today. The first process was peeler. This was a drop peeler where you would have potatoes loaded into a bin back here, and then dropped into this drum, which was painted with like a sandpaper paint, and it would spin them, and again, centrifugal forces in the outside, and after about 4 or 5 minutes, they're peeled. And hit a button, door opens, they come out onto a conveyor, the next one please, and into this bin. And then from this bin, they would go up. I love the picture here. You're talking 1950, and if you take very close notice here, he's smoking. It goes up the conveyor and then down into a slicer. And this is the slicer right here. And the slicer is a drum. I think, go to the next one. This is the fryer. Go one more. All right, go back. I have a picture in here somewhere. I thought maybe I had it here, what an actual slicer looks like. But it's a huge brass framed ring that you have literally razor blades about like that long, positioned in there at certain intervals, and that is constantly spinning. And again, as the potatoes come in, they're forced to the outside and they're sliced. And then they go through that and into another conveyor, which takes them into a fryer. And the fryer is a continuous process, and it would go through that to about 5 minutes, 350 degrees. And you can see these little paddles here that are constantly kind of pushing the chips down into the oil, and comes up the other side. And this is they call it the clock, but it's really it's a needle that measures the temperature, but it makes a circle, and so we always call it the clock. Go to the next one. After they're fried, they go under a salting machine, automatic salter, go up a conveyor, and be picked out. And I notice now that some chips companies actually sell the brown chips. Brown chips are just chips that stayed in the fryer too long. But we used to have, I worked there for 4 summers, and I worked in about every area of the production. And the girls would pick the brown chips off. We would literally have people that would come in and ask us to bag them up for them. They loved that. I'm sure OSHA would love that today, but that was what we did. And these are the tins. You see them just sitting around here being used to catch the chips. These are the 100-pound shortening tins that they would get. They're shortening it for the fryer. Next one. And again, continue down a series of conveyors. Oh, go ahead. And then they would, they had, I think, 3 packing machines at the Beavertown plant. They were small, and they would have a diverter that would take them off, take the chips off onto this conveyor, drop them into the top of the packing machine, and a lady would literally sit there, as she's doing right here, with opening a bag of chips, holding it under the chute. Chips drops down. Ladies check the weight. You can see a scale right here. And then this is a heat sealer. So now we're off of the stapling the chips together. We put them through the heat sealer, and voila. Go ahead. Come down through the heat sealer. They get bagged, or get boxed, I'm sorry, and put on little carts. You can see here. Carts get pushed out. Again, one truck, one delivery truck. Next one, which is right there. Packed in the delivery truck, and away they went. And this was a gentleman that I got to know for many years. He was their delivery man, and occasionally my grandfather would help out with that. But my uncle came into the plant. This is actually my great grandfather. Not the best picture of him. Looks like they caught him by surprise there, and but that was how they went. Now they had one distributor at that time that helped carry the chips. And it was in Millerstown, across the mountain in Juniata County. And this is the example of the wax paper bags, from how they changed from kitchen cooked to kitchen fresh. And it was funny. 70 years later, I asked my grandmother if she remembered something about the different sizes of the bags, and she wasn't really clear on that. But she remembered the bag salesman by name who came up from Baltimore, and he would stay with them when he was trying to sell them different products. And this is the examples of the tags that would hang from the tins. This is the first one. It would be pinched in between the lid and the tin, and this was one of the earlier ones that would be adhered to the side of the can. Next one, please. So now we move to Middleburg, and this was the front of the original plant, and it started construction in 1963. My great-grandfather passed, or in 1961, I'm sorry. My great-grandfather passed away after construction had begun, and so by the time they moved to Middleburg, my uncle was president of the company. And the office manager and production leader is my grandfather, and my grandmother is working in the office. You can see as these are the load sheets, that how the number of products grew. They went from 5-cent and a 10-cent bag to 1-pound can, and you have a number of different configurations over the years in the 60s, into the 70s and 80s, and the next one will be the current load sheet, which has 65 different product options, ranging from jalapeno chips to beef jerky to salsa, tortilla chips, and dozens of combinations of the different products that they have in different sizes. Again, we come back to the current production, and I'm going to try and trot through this here for you, give you an idea of how chips are currently made. This door right here is where it all begins. When a tractor trailer loaded with potatoes comes to the plant, it backs right in there, and it is met by a machine called the potato eater. And I got to drive this one time, and anybody ever go to the sprint car races, where in the summer when it's real dry and they drive around and there's just a plume of dust that kind of follows the cars? That's exactly what operating this machine is like. I mean, you look like this the driver sits right here. And you drive it on, and this is actually a conveyor. And the potatoes feed into this conveyor, go back a chute in the next one, and they flow back the chute, and right here is there's a toggle, and that's where you turn it on and off, and you push a crate like this underneath that, and it fills it. You hit it on and off, bring a forklift in, and away you go. And you can see how they're stacked. Now, when they were teaching me how to drive the forklift, I have to tell you this was the most intimidating part, because there's about a 1-inch leg that you have to sit on a 2-inch support. So you get up to about the third or the fourth one, and you're 16-year-old kid trying to put a 250, 300-pound crate of potatoes up there. You were sweating. And I never dropped one. Never dropped one. Crashed a forklift, but never dropped potatoes. And that's how they're stored until they're ready to be used. On the next one. And that takes us, this is potato storage right here where they're unloaded. So the next part will go right through here, which is where the process starts. This is the peeler. And again, you sit your crate of potatoes right here. The mechanism picks it up, dumps it into the hopper. Hopper has a conveyor that goes up into the peeler, and the peeler's the same. Right here's the door. It opens every so long, and voila, there you go. They'll come out, follow another series of conveyors, and next one. Come down through here. This is the slicer. Don't see anybody smoking now. This is modern. Through the slicer, they drop right down into a conveyor with a series of washers to wash the starch and make sure there's nothing, no remaining peels or anything like that on them. The next one. This is the picture of the slicer I'm telling you about. It's just, they're heavy. They're as heavy as they look. And these are the blades right here. This one looks like it's set up for the ripple chips. So they come out. They go through a series of several sprays, and that's a difference. If you ever noticed, the kettle chips are thicker than a regular chip. Right there is one of the big differences. In a kettle chip, they'll come right out of the slicer and go right into the fryer. They're not washed, and so there's a little bit heavier, a little starchier crunch to it. When they're washed and sprayed down a couple times before they go into the fryer, it makes a little bit of a lighter chip for it. Right here is the opening to the fryer. Next one. And now, so we're up here, and the fryer, of course, is right underneath the steam. And here they are coming out the other end of the fryer. Now, I have to tell you, one of my favorite things to do as a kid was to go out with my grandfather. He would go out of the office over lunch every day, and he would help them fry the chips. And there's a little stool right here that he would sit on. And he used to balance me on his knee, hanging out over the fryer, and there's a little paddle right here you could push them down with, and I used to love to do that. And again, I'm sure that OSHA would approve, but that's one of my favorite memories of my grandfather was doing that plant. Now here they come out of the fryer, now you're looking towards the production room, and this is the continuous salter. So they would go under that. The next one. Here's a close-up view of the clock face. Go ahead. So they come out of the salter, up the conveyor, and again we have ladies there helping to make sure that there's no foreign material or brown chips, anything of that nature. Now, if you've ever seen PCN tour, I have seen most of the one where they do the Utz factory. That's a national brand, and they have nationwide distribution. If you ever watch that, no one touches the chips after they're dumped into the peeler. No one touches them. They have electric eyes and puffs of air that high speed to blow the bad chips that it identifies with the electric eye out. We're not quite at that level yet. Again, if you look back to the pictures of the Beavertown factory, very similar, just bigger scale. They go up this conveyor, and it throws them into a ladder, which puts them up above the packing machines. vibrating to flatten them out so that they're even. And then there's a series of paddles that, again, divert chips into the different machines. This is the top of one of the machines, and this is where your seasoning would be added. Right here you have barbecue. And as they come down the line, seasoning would be added. They would go to the top of the packing machine, and through a series of buckets, they're weighed, and they're dropped down at the precise weight into the bagging machine. This is how the seasoning comes. It's a special blend that they get from McCormick for barbecue. So the bags are on rolls, and the roll is right back here, and it goes through a series of rollers to make sure that it's flat, and then this cone forms it into a bag shape. The heat sealer now is right here on the front where the folds come together. Chips come down this chute right here into the bag. It's weighed, it's sealed, it's done. Why don't you go to the next one? We have a couple. This is the back looking towards the chute. This is the roll of paper for the next one. Here they are coming up off the line, and they would come up into this turntable here, and get back boxed. The next one. I did a lot of this in the summers, setting up boxes everywhere, cardboard everywhere. It's a jungle of cardboard. After the chips are done, they're put on skids. This is a section of weekenders, and they're put into the storage area. Go to the next one. Boxes of different products there. And here's a truck in the loading bay, and you hand cart, truck it right in, and away you want it. And that would be right in this area. Right here in the center is where the storage of the potato or the finished product and your truck bays are. And then up here you can see more smoke. There is an identical production up there. Now they make some different products so that they're not constantly switching out seasoning and switching out bags and that, and so they have some of that isolated in different areas. Go to the next one, please. Here's the fleet of trucks, quite away from the small delivery van. There's the bigger panel truck, and here they come into your home for display. Next one, so it's there. One thing I wanted to show you was, I don't know how many of you remember the tubs. I mean, from 1947 approximately, when my uncle came back from the service, they were making some type of a tin or a tub, and what you would do with these is you would simply have again, kind of a thin paper bag. It would come down through the machine. You would hold it there, you'd catch it, put a twisty tie on it, put it in either the bag or the tub. I did a lot of this too. This was the last tub that they used, and they would come stored flat like this, and you'd pop them, set them up, and then they would come through and have a machine, drop the bag in, put the lid on, the lid gets stapled, and away you went. So this was really what followed the tin. And in 2007, they stopped production of these, and now everything is in the resealable bag. So that was kind of a bittersweet time for a lot of the people that really liked the tub. I just wanted to give you a little background on where my family ended. This is my great-grandfather, Ira. He passed away in 1961. This is my great-grandmother, Lottie, right here. And she passed away in 1969, and she worked in the plant after he died until the week before she passed away. And there they are, wiping off the old tins. Next one. This is my uncle, who ran the business. He passed away in 2007. These are my grandparents. My grandfather died in 1984, and he was still working. And my grandmother is still living. She's 92. She put her 70 years in at the plant and retired 2 years ago. So she was 90 when she walked away. Well, let's go to the next one. This was their the twins, and again, if you'll notice, they're dressed alike. It's their 80th birthday with my uncle. Go to the next one. And I thought this was a good one to end on. This was my grandmother last Christmas, her first selfie. So, that's the story of Middleswarth and Hershey potato chips. So I'll open it up if there are anyone that has any questions. Love to hear them. Nikki.
I might have missed this when I stepped out of the room, but for the earlier companies that were operating out of local garages, do they have to file a license with the state? I mean, could you just start up your own business and sell food to the public? How did that work?
Back then, there wasn't licensing. There were no building codes. I think Chuck might be able to speak. What was it? 1970 what? 75? When did Boca Code start? I mean, there was
in Derry a while ago.
Yeah, so
you could just
there was no,
sell food.
In fact, the original Beavertown plant, when they went from the barn to the built factory, they left Beavertown because they did not have a septic system. They did not have, everybody had their own on-lot sewer. And they would just run the water and the peels out into a field. And they got so many complaints over the years that they moved to Middleburg because they had a septic system that they could pump into that would treat the water and would treat the peels. And that was why they left Beavertown. I mean, that was in 61 that they left. So.
And as you can see, a lot of your bags have Department of Ag. That still regulates restaurants and food production.
Right. But
so it wasn't so much building goods.
Right. It was more the food.
Okay. So, but I mean, like, did they have to apply for that? Like, somebody came in and regulated the potato chip production in these garages, or just to make sure it was sanitary? Yeah.
Well, and I don't know, back in the 30s, 40s, probably not. But once you're in the 50s and 60s, you're regulated by the food standards.
Sure.
Is it still in the family?
Yes. The third and fourth generation, my cousins and his boys, both own it, and it's continuing.
You still work there in the summer?
No. Although it would be nice. I have said to Becky that it would be a good experience for my boys to go up there for at least one summer and learn the business. My dad worked there. My grandparents worked there. I worked there, and it would be interesting just to have them, continue to have that knowledge, that tie to it. But it's interesting, but it's hard work. It really is, and it's not clean work. It gives you a lot of respect for what they go through. In the summer it's hot, in the winter it's cold. Everything's greasy. The product's good. The process to make the products, as efficient as it can be. They're very popular, but it's just, it takes a lot of work to get from a raw potato to a chip.
Where do they get most of their potatoes from?
It varies by season. They get them from as far away as North Dakota, Florida, North Carolina. They get a lot from up through Maine, Michigan, and then depending on the season, it'll be even locally from Pennsylvania and New York. Central Pennsylvania, I think Schuylkill County leads the state in production of potatoes, and I think we're probably top 10 in potato production. But there's a difference between potatoes that we'd use for baked potato and chipping potato, and there are different varieties like Kennebec is a potato that would not be a good one, but Atlantic was one I remember that was a good chipping potato. And what we would do is when a load would come in, we would test the gravity of the potato, and I had to do this several times. And you put them in a wire basket. It was like an egg basket, and there was a special scale, and you would actually submerge them in water, and there was a formula that would tell you the water content of the potato. And if it was, my uncle sent several loads back. I mean, if the water content was too high, you're going to bake off. There's going to be nothing left. The water content has to be low enough that it allows the potatoes to crisp. And that's one of the big things was the quality control. But he ordered the potatoes until the day he died. I mean, that was his thing. Now, he trained somebody, when he was starting to get up there, so that they would know what to look for and what to do. But that was one thing he never let go of, was ordering the potatoes. Linda?
Did the different sorts of potatoes create a different flavor?
No, it's not like, the way I understand, like the chocolate with the cocoa beans from different countries. It wasn't. It's more the process. It's the type of oil that they're cooked in, how long they're cooked in the fryer. Like I said, making the kettle chips is a little bit different, and that gives them thicker consistency. And so it's the process and the ingredient, the seasoning, more than the potato. I think, trying to go back, I remember hearing talk of, they probably use 5-6 different varieties of potatoes, but it was that water content, the gravity, that was the most important factor.
How much time elapsed from when the tractor trailer brought the potatoes until they were finished using that batch?
Well,
Is
the
there
time-
a window there that you had to?
There is, and it varies. The areas that are potato storage are constantly, the air is constantly circulated. But in the winter, like now, they can hold potatoes for, a week or two, and it's really not going to affect the potato. If it's in the summer, if they don't leave any potatoes in that plant on Friday. They're used. So it would be probably within 24 to 48 hours in the summer that you're going to want to use whatever comes in. From the time that crate goes on the rack of the peeler to be dumped in, you're probably talking 9 to 10 minutes from then till they're in a bag, with the fryer being the longest part, about 5 or 6 minutes. Brad?
You had said about, I think it was Harry Shutter, had a machine for separating the oil after they were fried. Do they still have some kind of process today to do that?
No, the reason that they did that was because they would sit in the oil, and it was a batch at a time, and so
Okay.
it was not as succinct a process. You didn't have the temperature control as you do today with the monitors and stuff when you're in one kettle, and so that helped to mitigate some of that oil. But my great-grandfather used something very similar, and he actually made it himself out of an old washing machine tub, just similar to Shutter's. And now, as they come out of the fryer, they're on those open-air grates, and they go through several phases. There's an amount of time that elapses that they are allowed to cool, they're salted, and that helps to minimize that. The process has gotten a lot better. Art?
How far is the distribution now for Middleswarth?
They have distributors that go, of course, they actually run some of the panel trucks out of the plant in Middleburg locally. There's a distributor in Sunbury, Lewistown, Center Hall, Latrobe, and as far west as Latrobe. Trying to think of, Harrisburg has a big one. That's about as far south as they come, maybe down to like Elizabethtown. Then they go up into the Scranton area. They have a Larksville distributor up there. They have one in Crescent. They have one out east towards Reading. So it's a fairly wide swath, but still not big compared to some companies. I think they can make. I had a note here. Yeah, their production is about 3,400 pounds of chips a day. I mean, some of your bigger ones like us, they're probably doing that in half an hour. And that's Middleswarth only has one factory. I mean, that's it. It's 3 fryers, and the 3,400 is with all 3 fryers pumping.
How many employees?
About 75. And it's been that way since they added that second piece in 1974. had about 40 employees at Beavertown, or 20 employees at Beavertown, had 40 when they first went to Middleburg, and then had almost doubled with the other production area. Anybody else? Well, thanks for hanging with me. Brought a couple things to display some of the different bags and promotional products and stuff, so feel free to come up and take a look if you're interested. I'll be here for any more questions. And I have free samples. So,